Warning: All Things Crime is a true crime production that may contain violent or disturbing material. Viewer or listener discretion is advised. So when you say standard, can you explain that really quick?
Sure. Usually how we get a DNA standard from a person, we call it a known, is a buccal swab or an oral swab. You just take, it looks like a Q-tip, just take a swab and rub it on the inside of their mouths. And then that way we know, okay, that's that person's DNA. And we use DNA in forensics because it's the same throughout your body. It's the same throughout your lifetime. And at certain locations, right now we look at 24 locations. It's variable for every person in the world. So that's how we can come up and say, it matches this person and only this person.
Ashleigh and Nicole, welcome to All Things Crime. Appreciate you coming on this morning.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having us.
All right. For those of you watching and listening, I appreciate you being here with another episode of All Things Crime. And we have two special guests this morning, and I'm really excited about it. Richland County Sheriff is one of the very first offices that bought an M-Vac system, and they're out there in the heart of South Carolina, which is absolutely gorgeous country if you've never been there. And, you know, just getting to know them was just a treat for me. And I love traveling out there. I've been out there a number of times. And these ladies are just perfectionists at what they do. They are absolutely skilled and they are amazing people. And I really appreciate you guys coming on. So let's, Ashleigh, let's start with you.
Okay.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you got into being a DNA serologist?
So I have a biology degree from Coastal Carolina University in South Carolina. I started here in 2008 and as an admin assistant, and then they needed extra hands in the lab, and I then went into being a technician where I picked up the evidence, cut the evidence for the analyst, and passed it on to them. And then I went to Charleston for some extra training in serology, where we did pretend casework and blood analysis, looking for semen and a little bit of saliva. And then I became a serologist here. So I do mostly all of the looking for blood, looking for semen, and we don't do saliva testing. So I just do the blood and semen and also cut out the evidence for the analyst.
Awesome. How about you, Nicole?
So I'm in my 8th year as a forensic DNA analyst. Started out at Indiana State Police, and then we decided the weather was horrible and wanted to move to the South. So I've been at Richland County for a year and a half. And what I do mostly, sometimes I'll process, but most of the time, once Ashleigh's done processing and analyzing the evidence for body fluids or potential sources of DNA, she cuts all those out and gives them to me. And I go ahead and attempt to develop a DNA profile from those samples from the crime scenes, and then compare those DNA profiles to the profiles I developed from the standards, and I can say if it's a match or not.
So when you say standard, can you explain that really quick?
Sure. Usually how we get a DNA standard from a person, we call it a known, is a buccal swab or an oral swab. You just take, it looks like a Q-tip, just take a swab and rub it on the inside of their mouths. And then that way we know, okay, that's that person's DNA. And we use DNA in forensics because it's the same throughout your body. It's the same throughout your lifetime. And at certain locations, right now we look at 24 locations. It's variable for every person in the world. So that's how we can come up and say, it matches this person and only this person.
Yeah, and those buccal swabs are interesting because as I travel all over the world, I tend to, especially labs, they want me to give a reference sample so that if my DNA should show up somewhere, they always have me. They know that they hopefully can exclude me from whatever case they're working on. And yeah, I actually had to give a buccal swab to the Oman crime lab, and have to say I was a little nervous on that one, but it's there's professionals like you guys all over the world, and it's amazing what you guys can do. And I think one of the things that the audience is most interested in is how DNA has evolved like over the last 20 years. I don't, Nicole, how long did you say you've been doing this?
I'm in my 8th year, but I did take 7 years off. So I started in 2007.
Okay.
And that was right when technology was changing, where you used to have, you used to need like the size of a quarter for like blood, semen, saliva, just those body fluids to develop a profile. And right when I came in was when they had developed the technology and the kits where you could start getting DNA profiles from just touch samples, someone touching something.
But it's interesting how it used to take, I mean, literally, like you said, the size of a quarter, the amount, imagine a blood spot the size of a quarter in order to get any real useful information. And how much do you need now?
Just 2 cells. That's
Two
it.
cells.
Yes.
Okay, that's a new one.
That's
I've heard 10 to 12. That's 2 cells. Oh, that's just absolutely staggering. So I know on previous podcasts, we've talked about you slough off about 400,000 cells a day. So when you are trying to differentiate whose DNA it is, well, first of all, Ashleigh, let's go to you on this one. So when you're looking at a piece of evidence, and let's just go with touch DNA because that's the type of DNA that's deposited the most, right?
Yes.
So if you are looking for touch DNA and there's several individuals that you think, like say the victim's shirt you're looking at, how would you go through that process?
So first off, I would ask the investigators if they have like any video or if they have any witnesses saying like an individual grabbed them on the collar or around their waist or somewhere like that. So first I would ask the investigators where they think that touch DNA would be. And then I would go to the evidence and scrape it with a scalpel and swab it, or they sometimes want us to M-Vac it. So then I would M-Vac the shirt wherever they think that the victim or the suspect may have touched.
And considering they only need a few cells for somebody else's DNA to get mixed in there, how do you separate that out?
So at that point, we ask for a victim's buccal swab so we can eliminate them from that mixture.
And possibly anybody else, like a boyfriend or something like that?
Yes. Anybody that may have touched that shirt or maybe in the house, children, boyfriends, parents, anybody that may potentially be on that shirt, so we can exclude them.
And when you say exclude, you're talking that eliminates them from the process, or what do you think?
See, that's more of Nikki's area.
we have the database CODIS, Combined DNA Index System. The only profiles that can go into that are known standards, and from crime scenes, it's the unknown suspect only. We don't want to put that person's boyfriend in or the victim in. So when she's talking about like we're getting those elimination standards, that way if we get an unknown profile and we think, let's say it's the victim's shirt, and they said, well, the suspect grabbed my shirt. We can, we see, okay, victims on there and someone else. That way we can say, okay, well, it's not boyfriend and it's not, they're kids. So most likely it's that suspect. Let's put it into CODIS and see if it matches those convicted offenders or the suspects, arrestees, juveniles that have been put in as knowns.
The reason I'm asking this is I was a guest on another podcast, and it's interestingly enough, it was a couple of ladies that are engineers, and the topic was more along the genealogical DNA, but it was also they were fascinating with just like STR type DNA, where we have the CODIS database, and one of the fears was that people's DNA is being used without their consent, and it's just kind of arbitrarily out there, and with the lab equipment and the processes becoming so sensitive that people are going to start getting convicted just based on their DNA that they left, riding on the subway or something like that. And as one of my things was, I was like, look, first of all, you probably will never be convicted just based on one piece of evidence. Like, even if somebody has your DNA profile, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get convicted. It's just one piece of the puzzle. And from you guys, once you develop that DNA profile, you hand that back to the detectives, and then they have to go back to work and say, well, based on this new piece of evidence, what does that do for the case? So in you guys' experience, how can, number one, can you elaborate at all on that? And two, based on your experience with working cases, how does your, once you develop, you do your work and hopefully develop a good profile, how does that further the case from you guys' perspective?
So I think once they get, like, we do CODIS notes and also reports. So when we give that to the investigators, then they do have a lead, and then they can go talk to that person that may be a suspect or is on that piece of evidence and ask them why they may be on that piece of evidence.
Working in the crime lab, probably, we should fear it the most because, our DNA is all over that lab, of course we like clean and everything, but I've never heard of anybody just being like arrested just because, they get a CODIS match. Of course, then it goes to the investigator, like she said, to go and see, okay, where were they at that time? Have they had, a history of breaking into houses or whatever? So, I understand that could be people's fear, but it's kind of, it's how it's always been. Like, just because someone saw you near the scene of the crime, that that doesn't mean that you're going to go and get arrested and get convicted of that crime, spend forever in prison. So,
yeah, at least you hope not, right?
Definitely.
Well, that would be on the investigator.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you guys do work both for the prosecution and the defense, correct?
I've never, yes, we're unbiased.
Yes.
We will go and testify for either one. I haven't personally testified for the defense, but I did see some forensic scientists go and, they called and they testified to the evidence. We're going to testify the same way, whether it's prosecution or defense. So yeah.
I've never testified for defense.
But it does happen. Yeah.
Well, I know a lot of former lab people that have gone off and like almost consultants now, and they do not so much testifying because they're typically not involved directly with processing and creating the DNA profile. So I know it's usually the prosecution that is calling you guys because that DNA evidence is typically incriminating against the defendant. But I thought what you said there, Nikki, was really, really important, because you said it wouldn't matter if it was the defense or the prosecution, you would testify the same way. So kind of elaborate on that, if you would. When you're on the stand and you have a DNA profile that, between you and Ashleigh, you've developed it, and maybe Ashleigh, you can talk about maybe an experience on the stand as well. What's that like? What is it that you are, when you're testifying, what is it you're testifying about?
The facts of the evidence. The evidence doesn't lie. I'm just there. If it's for the defense or if it's against the defense, that's just the facts that we come up with on on the evidence. So, and it
Well, and
is
maybe also, why is that important? Why is it important for you guys to be pretty much perceived as neutral?
I think it's important to have somebody completely unbiased. I mean, if we knew somebody in the case, we'd have to take ourselves off. I wouldn't be a DNA analyst for like my neighbor's house they were broken into. That way, when you go and testify, that person's getting a fair trial. We're just going to go. We do give opinions. As DNA analyst, I will give my opinion on whether this was a match or not, but it's always verified by a technical reviewer who's also unbiased on the case. And then that way, nobody could ever say, well, you're just saying that DNA matches because, that's your friend and, the guy on the stand is your enemy and you don't like him and you want to see him in prison forever. I think that goes to help the justice system, make a fair trial. We are trained to, how to look at the evidence and give our opinions and say a match or not. And then also we give statistics for if we say a match, that's a positive association. We go ahead and give statistics that are completely unbiased. That's based on, population genetics with groups of people that are unknown to that, everybody in the case, including us. So, just going in and stating the facts and then letting the jury decide, if that person's innocent or guilty, I think that makes everything fair.